I understood every single thing this person said. And then they signed this one sign. What did that mean? The deaf community will humble you really quickly. I don't even cuss. And so I'm like, the F word's trying to come out of my mouth. You can be certified, but not qualified, or you could be qualified and not certified. The program doesn't prepare you for Alcoholic Anonymous testimony, right? You find yourself in situations and then you realize, oh, here's a limitation of mine. One thing that really frustrates them is...
Welcome to the Keyconceptspodcast. Today we have our special guest, someone who is giving voice to the voiceless. We're joined by Marguerite Vigneri, and today we're stepping into the world of sign language interpreting. Margaret, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Marguerite, if someone was meeting you for the first time today, like a colleague, let's just say, how would you introduce yourself?
We're on a job site and I'm meeting my colleague for the first time. I would introduce them with my name. I'm Marguerite Vigneri. They probably ask me how long I've been interpreting. So I would give them that answer. That's usually kind of the banter. How long have you been here? I've never met you. Where did you get your training? And so we kind of start that dialogue, but usually just, I'm your team. It's kind of how that would go. So
it sounds like this is very relaxed, nonchalant, no fancy titles, pretty straightforward. Hey, I'm Marguerite Vigneri. I'm your teammate. I'm your co-sign language interpreter. Let's get the job done.
Yep.
Straight and simple. I like it.
Yeah.
So when you were exploring careers, before you got into sign language, what made you choose sign language interpreting versus something else?
So I was about 14, 15 years old, and my dad was very strict. And I got into a little bit of trouble in high school. And so at that point, he said, you know what? You don't get to go to school anymore. You have to come and work. And at that point, I was watching them as I was cashiering, and I thought, I want to know what they're saying. And at the same time, coincidentally, I had a friend, Jennifer, and she said, I'm getting rid of these books and I'm just perusing through the books and I find the sign language dictionary, and I'm now homeschooled. And so my homeschool teacher is like, you need a foreign language. So all of this kind of happens within weeks of each other. And so I take the dictionary, I'm signing up for a class, and I'm around deaf people for the first time. I've seen my first deaf person. And I'm just thinking to myself, I want to say something to them.
So certified versus qualified, what is the difference?
Under California law, you have to be certified to take certain jobs. And so if you are not certified, technically the agencies can't send you. Now there's another group of interpreters that have yet to be certified. It's a test, it's pass fail, and there's lots of little hoops you have to jump through to get there. And so if you're not certified, you can still technically be qualified. What separates me from somebody else is a piece of paper, essentially. I passed the test. They have yet to take the test. In our field, we often say you can be certified, but not qualified, or you could be qualified and not certified. There's lots of interpreters that I work with that are phenomenal, that are not yet certified. And then I have the opposite, where I work with people that have been in the game for, 30, 40 years, and I just go, it's time to retire. You are not qualified for this, even though you are certified.
How do you get your clients, and what does a typical day look like for you?
I'm in California. Our region in Sacramento specifically works is that there are agencies that will contract with hospitals, school districts, the state, you name it. If you're looking for a sign language interpreter, you typically will go online and type in sign language interpreter near me, and it'll auto-populate an agency for you versus my name specifically. And then they send out a blast to me with 100 other interpreters. Typically, just if you're available and if you are certified, you will see that email. There will also be instances where you're available and you're qualified. You will see that email, depending on the contract of the job. Some jobs really require certification. So if you're not certified, you're not going to see that email. And then it's just a matter of saying, yep, I'm available. That time slot works for me. And you're essentially subcontracted with the agency. That's how you get booked on jobs. So I don't do any of the hunting myself, so to speak. The agencies provide the work. The interesting world of tax itemizations for an interpreter, it's a lot. If you are working for agencies, you're a 1099 employee, you are an independent contractor. And, if you know the difference, I don't get a W-2. So I'm not working under someone. I don't report to a boss, essentially. I represent myself under that agency. So yeah, it's a lot of keeping track of stuff, but at the same time, it gives me the freedom and the flexibility to do what I need to do when I need to do it, take jobs as I see fit, or not. I really get to pick, and it's a nice place to be in if you need flexibility.
What is the requirements to be a sign language interpreter?
1, know the language. 2, you have to know how to interpret. 3, you have to be able to pass the test to become certified. In order to take the test, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Or there is an alternative path, which says, I believe something like so many hours in the community plus some kind of college or education. They kind of count it up, and then you have your quote bachelor's degree, and then you can submit all that information, all your experience, and you can say, hey, certifying body, can you please accept my application? And then they review it, and it's whatever evidence you bring to the table to say you have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree, then you can take the test without necessarily going to school.
For someone new getting into the field from like 1 to 10, how would you rate the difficulty for learning sign language?
It's hard. I think maybe like a doctor. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but it came easy for me, but I was a child. But I know that it's not easy. And there's still things that I'm learning. I learn every day. And I work with people that are absolutely amazing. And they've even had to overcome hurdles and practice. And so learning a language and getting into the community, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So I don't want to deter anyone because I think it's one of the best jobs in the world. But be prepared to actually put in some effort. It's not one of those, you took the certification to be a phlebotomist and now you can like draw blood. It's not as simple as that. It's a little bit more complex in the profession.
What type of mindset or qualities does someone need to have to be successful as a sign language interpreter?
Humility. The deaf community will humble you really quickly. You're walking into people's lives. And so to not have the humility for this profession, and you don't even have to be the best interpreter. If you don't walk in with humility, you will not be successful. And so I would say humility first, and then just a determination to get it, a determination to be better, a determination to figure it out, to put in the work, YouTube, making deaf friends in the community, really plugging yourself in to understand that world, especially if you didn't grow up in it.
Is there anything that the education could not have prepared you for?
Interpreting really requires your whole brain. The synapse cross back and forth, and you have to tap into both to interpret. And that is something that comes with practice. And so you can go through the schooling, but until you're sitting, and we call it the hot seat, until you're in the hot seat doing the actual job, you don't even know what you don't know yet. And the muscle hasn't been worked out enough for you to know where your deficiencies are. And then just the scenarios you end up finding yourself in, you're like, wait a minute, we talked about this in class. They said we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And then you get there and then you're like, oh, I did X, Y, and Z and it blew up in my face. Why didn't it work? And so you realize these are people. It's not a formula.
How did you navigate the COVID era with interpreting when you can't see people's faces?
I know my deaf clients really appreciated that I didn't wear a mask because so much of the language is on the face, through the facial expressions. And so navigating that with the doctors, like I said, there was a little bit of advocacy that needed to be done in order to be able to do my job. It's kind of like asking a surgeon to show up for heart surgery, but you're not going to give them access to their tools. They're not going to be able to do their job. And so convincing doctors who are in their profession, with their degrees and their prestige to be told, I know that the rule is that we're to keep our masks on, but for this situation, I'm going to take my mask off so that what you are saying is clearly communicated.
Being culturally fluent, that term kept coming up. So what does that mean? And how is that different from just being a sign language interpreter?
I don't know what the definition really is, but I'll give you my perspective on it. Being an interpreter means that you come in and you're facilitating the language to the best of your abilities. And you get the job done and you leave, I guess, in simplest terms. To be culturally fluent, I would think there's a little bit more layers in terms of just technicalities. How you're delivering that message will just look different. I would think one of the best compliments that you can get as an interpreter is, are your parents deaf? because the way you're interpreting or the way you're presenting the language, those nuances are there where deaf people kind of see you go and they pick up that you have some nuances that maybe somebody who's fresh out of the program wouldn't have.
What's one thing that hearing people would be totally surprised about to learn about the deaf culture?
Hearing people are surprised by some of the things that we interpreters encounter or what we have to navigate, because that's not their world. That's not something they've had to experience. And it's cultural. So I think there's just a lot of differences between the deaf culture and the hearing world that kind of clash, that hearing people would say, oh, I didn't even consider that, or I didn't even think that. So
that is a little surprising, actually. Like, they have their own culture, their own community, own style of doing things, and they're very different than the way hearing people interact.
Yeah.
Is there a common misconception that people have about the deaf community?
I'm not deaf, so I don't want to be the authoritative person in this subject or on this question. But one thing that really frustrates them is, oh, you can't lip read? One
question that I often think about, and I'm sure maybe the audience is thinking about, is for hearing people, they have inner thoughts. You know, when we think and we talk to ourselves in speaking language. But what about the deaf community? When they have their inner thoughts, do they sign? Do they have inner thoughts? Or how do they process information?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I am not the expert in that. I am not deaf. And I don't think I've even ever asked a deaf friend,
so
hey, how do you, I've never thought about their thoughts. So I can't even answer that. I'm not even going to try.
For the listeners out there, if you know somebody, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to know the answer to this question. We talked about misconceptions around deaf people and stuff like that, but what about for interpreters?
There's a lot of misconceptions about the language. So they'll say, is there a sign for every word? There's that misconception there. And I say, no, I interpret, it's a concept for concept. You know, it's not word for word. It has its own structure, its own grammar. Or is it universal? Can you talk to any deaf person? Like, no, it's American Sign Language. If you go to France, there's something else there. You go to Russia, there's something else there. You know, each culture, each region has its own language. And they'll say, oh, it's a language, you know, but because it's visual, they assume that everybody understands it. And it's different from state to state, region to region, different accents, different signs.
You know, there's one thing that I've heard some people get once they get into the field is that they end up getting a deaf name. So can you explain what is that? And do you have one? And how do you get one?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's called a sign name, and it's a sign that represents your name. And you cannot make it up yourself. When someone in the deaf community gets to know you, as you're going through the program or as you get introduced to the community somehow and you start signing, there will be usually a deaf person who will say, what's your name? And then you spell your name out and they'll say, what's your sign name? And you'll say, I don't have one. And they'll go, oh, I want to give you a sign name. It usually is something about your character or what you look like physically. It's kind of a rite of passage, like the community bestows your sign name, and then it's almost like you're one of us, you know? So it's a real honor, and you cannot make it up yourself, and you can't give yourself a sign name.
What do you do when you're in a situation where the person is maybe at a live event or a keynote where you can't stop?
This is where you hope that you have a really good team, because often we do not work alone. So if I'm going to be in a situation where there's a keynote speaker, anything over an hour really is done with another interpreter. You would look to your team because it'll say, you know, they'll say a name and you'll go, what was that? Or what was the last name? Or, you know, what title did they have? You know, because it's just gargly, or it was spoken so fast and you missed it because there's no signs. Your finger spelling everything that you're hearing. You look to your team and then they'll give it to you. When you get a job or you see a request that goes out there, you first have to pause and take inventory of yourself. Am I in the right mental space? What is the subject on? Is that something that conflicts with my own biases? Am I able to suspend them in the moment for that interpretation that needs to happen? You know, there's lots of questions that you ask yourself before you even take the job. The agency can't vet you for you. You have to kind of look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm certified. Should I be at this rally? Should I be at this doctor's appointment? Should I be, on stage with this political figure? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. And so if you've done your due diligence, you don't find yourself in those situations. And these are some of the things that you talk about in training where, they'll give you these scenarios and they'll say, what do you do? And, the right answer is you stop the presenter and you ask for clarification. And then you get there and you're like, I'm not stopping the governor. What are you talking about? I can't say, what did you mean by that?
What about a concept that's not interpretable?
I would say if there's a concept that is not interpretable, it's not that it's not interpretable. The limitation is within the interpreter. It would be the limitations of the interpreter that presents that roadblock.
What about jokes and sarcasm?
We had talked about cultural fluency, and that would be one of those that if you have mastered that, the cultural fluency, you can take, I think what you're referring to is like an idiom maybe, right? And you can take that concept and apply it. Now, will it land the same? Probably not.
You mentioned video relay earlier as well as interpreting in person. So how do they differ? And is one harder than the other?
Video relay, VRS, is what we would call it. You wear a headset, you're in front of a screen, you got your monitor here, you get a phone call, you answer, you're the middle person for that phone call. You've got 2D versus 3D, sign falls flat on a screen versus in person. So now you've got your deaf clients on their phones. So they're this big, it's Blair Witch Project, the phone's going like this and they're signing with one hand and you're like, oh my gosh, please stop. I can't understand you.
There's got to be some strain with like carpal tunnel and things like that. So how do you deal with the risks that come with constantly interpreting?
Interpreters will definitely experience some type of wrist something. I think every interpreter I know has said, oh, my wrist. But it's usually coupled with a couple other things. It's not just you interpreting. It's usually the sitting, if you're navigating software, if you're the repetitive movement of one thing. Signs are not repetitive in that same way. And so this is my not authoritative answer. I would say it's coupled with the environment when you get injured, because I don't think the job itself should produce injury. We work in pairs. We take turns every 20 minutes. You shouldn't, as a good interpreter, find yourself in a position where you are overextending yourself.
Is that why you have two interpreters go to every job?
No, actually, it's really based in science. They have taken a look at the interpreter brain and interpreting in general and where the language breaks down. And they have seen that there is an optimal time range where the interpretation is most effective and most accurate. And it is within about the 20-minute range. Anything over an hour is usually sent with 2. And that is so that you can maintain correct interpretation for that whole duration of that speaking engagement, whatever it is. If it's over an hour, they'll send 2. We take turns somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes because science has shown that that is the most optimal range for the most accurate interpretation.
What about artificial intelligence? Is that impacting the sign language interpreting field at all?
I haven't seen it. Like we had talked about, sign language is so dynamic and so contingent on region and location and all of that, that I will be impressed if they can figure that out, because there's also not just one way. You can take the same sentence and put 3 interpreters up there and you'll get 3 different interpretations. And so when I think about AI, I just think, how would they be able to kind of take all those nuances into consideration and put that out there? Is it impossible? I don't think it's impossible, but I would be curious to see how that works. But it's yet to be seen from what I know. Maybe there's something out there. If you see it and I just have missed it, send it to me. I want to see it.
As a new sign language interpreter, what advice would you give yourself after everything you've learned, experienced, and been through?
I would tell my younger self to be a little bit more mindful and to pause and to really look at and try to predict maybe some of my limitations before I was to take a certain job or not. And I made a lot of mistakes in my early 20s, first 1, 2, 3 years of interpreting before I was certified. You get your feet wet and you go, oh my gosh, this is not what they taught me. And then how come I don't know this? And why did I say yes to this job? And so to pay attention to that a little bit more. And, within the time I do that less, but that would be definitely something that I wish I was more aware of.
Yeah, that's great advice for someone stepping into the field. Just check in with yourself to see if you're the right fit for the job.
Yeah. What would be one thing I could advocate for on their behalf? I would say, we all can learn to sign. They cannot learn to hear. That's the limitations that they have in terms of them taking in auditory input, right? So, but we can learn to sign. And so I would hope that more people would just take an interest in learning some basic communication with the deaf community and attempting to have some more interactions so the worlds can cross. I will say there's an element of surprise from hearing people to know that I am in every section of the world. If you've been in surgery, I've been interpreting that surgery. If you've been in a drug deal, I've interpreted that drug deal. If you've been in a car accident, if you've made a spicy phone call, if you've called to yell at somebody, if you've called to order pizza, everything, whatever you experience as a person, deaf people are experiencing that too. And so to keep that in mind, that they experience everything just like you would.
Do you have a story that's really memorable?
This job, which nobody wanted, was out in the mountains about an hour away. So they were paying a little bit more. And I thought, okay, it was late at night, no cell service. And it's like an Alcoholic Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous situation, but the meetings are held on site of where they even sleep. And they go into story time. All of a sudden, they're talking about drugs and hiding it up their butt and being strip searched and the cops and getting pulled over. And I'm signing this at this point, and I'm going, okay, this is so outside of my own even life experiences. Like, how do I sign that I put my pipe up my butthole? I don't know. And so I'm sitting here going, oh, what are the tools? What's the classifiers? What's the hand shape? Because again, the program doesn't prepare you for Alcoholic Anonymous testimony.
They start cursing. You have to enact their full embodiment?
I embody their whole presence to the best of my abilities. Yeah.
Dang, that's crazy. So you're just yelling at these people at this point?
Yeah, it was so bad. I was like, oh my God. And as they're leaving, I'm like, it wasn't me, it was him. It wasn't just a reminder, it wasn't my voice, it was his words. And I look back now and I'm like, should I have even been explaining myself? I don't even know.
Where can people go to find more resources on sign language interpreting or deaf culture in general?
There's lots of resources for local agencies here. And then those agencies have resources. And then American River College here in Sacramento, they have a great interpreter training program. I think it's called Interpreter Preparation Program now, IPP. So they have a great IPP program. Los Rios College, Los Rios School District, Community College, they have great resources, ASL classes. And so, yeah, your local community college has them here in Sacramento. And then the agencies are a great resource as well. And then just good old Google, I'm sure, will help you if it's something really, really specific. But I would say, yeah, the agencies and the colleges are a really good place to start.
How did your expectations of the industry that you were getting into when you came in differ from the experience that you actually had when you entered the industry?
If I could sum it up, I would say they didn't teach this. They didn't tell me about this one. Or, it's what you're trained to do, and then what you end up doing sometimes are very different.
You have a plan, 3 seconds into that plan, it's gone.
Yeah, you get there, you're so prepared. You're like, I know where I'm going to sit, and I know where they're going to want to be, and I know what's going to happen. And you're like, wait, what? So yeah, expectations, how you were trained and what you actually experience in real time. Only real time trains you for real time. So,
Marguerite, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Key Concepts Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
If today's conversation opened up your eyes or sparked curiosity or deepened your respect for the sign language field, we hope you'll continue to learn and stay connected. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Key Concepts Podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.